Yeah, you had over 100 hits for your last one.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, because we got Twitter with, what do you call it, a number of things.
Is that the PTSD one?
Just PTSD or addiction.
Hmm.
What's the name?
It's pretty in here.
This is Paul Schock with the,
Turn the mic.
oh,
It's on.
This is Paul Schock with Skip Program at the Restoration Community Church. And our panel discussion today is domestic violence and awareness. And today we have two panelists, and I'll have them introduce themselves.
Again, good evening, everybody. My name's Jim Haney, officer here in Scott City, Missouri.
And I'm Susan Redford.
First off, what I would like to do is just have you guys talk a little bit about why you're on the panel or what your experience is with the subject. And at the same time, put in the back of your mind, think about the people that probably never experienced anything about the topic and sort of educate them.
You go first.
Well, oddly enough, I think it starts, Jimmy's my brother, oddly enough, but we experienced it as children with our mother firsthand, and then I was a victim of domestic violence for years as an adult later on in life. So I think a lot of people who aren't in the situation don't realize, they think, well, why can't you just get out of the situation? It's not that hard to leave someone, but it's not about the leaving. That's what I think people don't realize, you know.
And me, so twofold. One, as a child, we say our mother, probably the one that had the most impact on me was my stepfather that I had. He was a violent person, violent to my mother, but for some reason I was also the one he liked to pick on and liked to beat on. I mean, choked me unconscious, threw me through tables, beat me to a pulp. And at that time I was about 4 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, when all this was going on, which led into other stuff, with my mom and other boyfriends she had, and then some other types of abuse that took place with my mom and stuff as well. And I don't think people realize how much. I didn't realize it till I really started looking at myself and experiencing things and seeing things other people were going through, how much that impacted the rest of my life. Everything I did from that moment forward was impacted by that without me ever realizing it. And then as a police officer, I see domestic violence, unfortunately, almost on a daily basis. Victims of all kinds. And the hard part is when I'm sitting there dealing with somebody and I see a kid and I see me and that little kid. I know what they're going through. And people, it's real easy to see the bruises and the cuts, but the psychological stuff that everybody's going through, the victims, the kids, and everybody else around, the loved ones of the victims, that psychological impact they're all having, that doesn't heal as quick.
Yeah, and whenever we were children, I remember thinking I would never put my children through what we went through as children. And I was a little bit more fortunate than Jimmy. I didn't get the abuse firsthand from a parent, but I watched what my mom went through being abused by the stepfather, and I thought, I will never put my kids through that. And then lo and behold, it happens.
Yeah. And it's, again, so as an officer, I see a lot of these victims, and like Susan was saying, that it's not the leaving. I can see the desperation in their faces and in their actions. They want that situation to stop. But you know, human nature is just a crazy thing, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, I don't know. They want it to be a healthy relationship. They
Yeah.
want it to be a good relationship.
Well, and that's one thing that I can say, like, the reason that I stayed was because I just thought if I love this person enough and show them unconditional love, it's gonna fix whatever's broken. But it doesn't.
Um, so,
It, I can imagine in the sense that most kids at school, they have friends at school and they don't realize that their friends might be getting abused. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have felt that and went through that growing up, is that you're actually having to convey this falsehood of who you are and what's going on at the home.
Yeah, you definitely get taught to portray a different life, kind of, on the outside.
you know, you get real good at just putting
Yeah.
that smile on your face.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure no children that we went to school with knew that there were days where I would have to take Jimmy, and we had a younger sister as well, and hide them outside while whatever was happening inside was going on.
You know, and
Would you guys have a hard time? Did you guys find having a hard time having friends over or hiding things?
I don't think
We
we ever
ever
had
had-
friends over.
we never
That
had
wasn't an
friends
option. You know,
Yeah.
that wasn't something we could do.
I never even thought about it, though. That's the weird part. That wasn't
Yeah.
part of our growing up. That wasn't part of our childhood. It was never, I had friends at school. We had a few friends we played with outside, but no one ever came inside of our
Yeah.
house.
And, you know, I see that as an officer, I see it now. These kids know what to say to DFS, or family services, whatever you want to call them. They know what to say to me. And nothing breaks my heart more than whenever a kid sees that police uniform and they see me as the bad guy. Because I'm the furthest thing from it. But also understand that, you know, no matter how bad a parent is to a kid, no matter what my mom did to me, no matter what they put me through, that's my mama. I love her. I love her more than anything in the world. And I don't want to get taken away from her because I love her. And so they don't want to, you know, they don't want to tell me what happened because they get told, like, oh, they'll take you away from me. And
Yeah.
that's, for a child, that's nightmare scenario right there, right? Because, I mean,
As bad as it is, that's your normal, that's your
Right.
home, that's your family, and that's what we all want.
yeah.
So did you guys live near other neighbors or away from?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure the other neighbors noticed things and,
And here's another thing too, like as a child, you think a lot of what's happening is normal. You don't realize how unnormal it is.
Yeah, you think everybody goes through that.
Yeah,
You know, you don't think that much about it. You know, thinking back now, and again, I see it in law enforcement occasionally, that neighbor that, like, that's their personal stuff. We don't, you know, hey, it's between husband and wife. We're not getting involved in that. If you're one of those people, shame on you. I mean,
Yep.
if somebody you have to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves.
and I can imagine it's hard actually if you're a neighbor and if you're an innocent bystander seeing a parent or an adult abusing a child.
Yeah.
It's
well,
hard.
and if it wasn't for my neighbor, I would probably still be in the abusive relationship that I was in. They actually, fortunately, I guess you call it fortunately, I ended up in Florida with my abuser, and the laws are a lot different there. So when the neighbor called the police because he could hear what was happening, they kicked in our front door, busted in the window, took him to jail, and they're a lot better at making sure that they made sure he couldn't contact me. Because here in Missouri, they would have taken him to jail, and he would have probably honestly been out the next day or a week later or after court. And while he was in jail, he still would have been able to make those collect phone calls to me or write me those letters. So it's hard to get away. It's very hard to get away because, again, I just wanted to love him, make him better, and then our life would be perfect and we could raise the children everything would be okay. And in Florida, having that separation for a year, he went to prison for a year for what he did.
Florida has amazing domestic violence laws.
And that separation is what saved me.
I know that Netflix came out with a movie series called The Maid, and that was actually dealing with domestic violence and the individual trying to have a different identity and save her child and everything through the violence that they went through. But and I know that it's not easy. I think one of the things that you guys just breached upon is that growing up in a family of abuse, I'm sure there was also substance abuse too going on.
Yep.
And that it does become the norm, and not knowing what norm is other than that, and wanting that love and that reinsurance and building that confidence. I'm sure during that time that your self-esteem was very low because it was wrapped around trying to get that attention and not
Yep.
getting in trouble.
Yeah, and I've been out of my abusive relationship now for 10 years, and there's still hard days today.
And that's one of the things, I know this sounds really weird, but when you're in that abusive situation, and you can talk on this more, it's almost that Stockholm syndrome. Well, I know they can beat me, but they're not now. And so look how much they love me.
Yeah, and abusers are amazing at loving you in the perfect way. So you feel this warm, amazing love most of the time, usually, and then that's what you crave. And then you go through the abuse, and it might be, it's a short-lived moment, usually. And all you want is that warm love to come back, and whatever you have to do to get that is what you do.
I think that there's a lot of levels to this. And one of the levels, as you're talking about, is that a good example is that you're in a bound relationship with your family. And you can't really divorce your family because you're being raised by your mom and dad. Your mom and dad can get a divorce, that's a different thing. And then putting the pressure on you by probably telling you can't report anything or can't tell other people because we're going to be taken away, and horror stories and everything like that. And that's a lot of pressure on a child to actually deal with.
Yeah, it's a lot of conditioning too. I can't remember personally a time where my mom necessarily said, you can't tell anyone that this happens.
So
I
we
just
already
knew.
knew.
You just
Already knew
knew.
it.
And I think that, again, comes from my mom had that perfect personality to be abused, and she happened to get with someone who had that perfect personality to abuse her, and we've grown into that and been conditioned in a way to know what's right and wrong for our family.
I think it's important when you talk about kids and when they're in a situation, something to be aware of is it also makes them the perfect target for other types of abuse, other predators that are out there, because you're already conditioned for it. You're already susceptible. You're vulnerable already.
Yeah.
And they know that to keep your mouth shut, and nobody's really going to say anything.
It's, how do I put it? I mean, we're all talking about condition. We're all conditioned to actually watch TV soaps, TV sitcoms, and we watch movies about families and stuff like that. We sort of idealize those things, and we try to live through those things even when growing up. But you don't see those shows wrapped around what it's like being in an abusive family and the kids being in an abusive family and the day-to-day routine of what you have to deal with. I mean, I can only fathom just to think about some of the things that you guys had to deal with to survive as growing up.
You know, thinking back, like there's plenty of times my clothes were dirty, you know, I wasn't well kept, this and that. Well, I hate to say it, sometimes it was just a success to get out of my house in the morning without getting my teeth kicked in. You know, everything else wasn't as high up on my priority list. And that ends up being something that affects, you know, for years, and a lot of overcoming to fix some of that conditioning. But you know, the hard part is recognizing that it is an issue, that it's not normal, that it's okay to be angry about it, and it's okay to want to change it. But, you know, and as a law enforcement, I see it. You know, we all know that women are abused more than men, but I'm surprised by the number of men that are in victims of the domestic violence as well. And very rarely is it ever completely one-sided. It's just, unfortunately, men are usually bigger and stronger, so when they do something, it's much, much worse.
Yeah, and also we're more nurturing by nature, you know, so I did not fight back for a very long time.
Yeah.
I just didn't, just let it happen.
And the mental abuse, going through all that, and the scars in having to deal with all that, I don't think people realize it's almost like a big chess game.
Yeah.
And so, believe it or not, I didn't process a lot of what I went through until I was in the police academy. And the subject of all these things came up, and we were talking about it, and I was realizing, I'm like, oh, that's me. Oh, okay, I went through that. Because it's easier not to process it, not to think about it, and we don't realize the effects it's having on our lives because it's so hard to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, the bruises and everything were way easier to heal.
Well, let me put it this way too. I mean, I'm sure you have extended family. And how did the extended family deal with things?
Like, I can honestly say, I don't even think our grandparents knew. And I think our father, who wasn't in the house, that he wasn't part of the abusive relationship with our mother. I think he was aware that something was happening, but again, not fully aware of the extent of what was going on. Because, and here's the even worse, but I lived in the same house. Even though I saw most of what happened to my brother, there's still things that happened that I didn't know.
But, you know, and I hate to say it, even the extended family, I think some of them knew stuff was happening, but it was oh yeah,
It's
Poor
not their place.
yeah, they're not gonna, I mean, our stepdad was nuts. He was a handful, okay? Nobody wants the drama in their life. Nobody wants to be the one that, you know, 'cause
Shines the light on
that
it.
shines the light on something,
Yeah.
because now you're getting the attention back on you. If this person might retaliate towards me. Or if you're the grandparent and you bring it up, well, now you're not allowed to see the grandkids anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many little dynamics to it, but, you know.
And then, like, as the being abused as an adult, other adults witnessed some of my abuse here in Missouri and never said or did anything about it, you know, right there in front of them. And I felt like, like, if someone is watching that happen and they're not doing anything, who can you ask?
It's okay. I know that, I know it's not easy. I know there's a lot of pain. And I know that sometimes it's not easy to think about the past too, because there's a lot of hurt, and uh, it's almost like another life, and that you've actually become something better now,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and that's the main thing, but.
And you know, so I'm sure it's also frustrating for family members because, you know, as a law enforcement officer, I've seen it many times, and I've seen my sister go through it many times. You know, for instance, one that always sticks out in my head, I get a call. It was a 911 hang-up. I get there, the guy answers the door. He's got scratches all over his face and neck, and last thing he wants is me to come in the house. Right? He's trying, like, oh no, everything's fine. Yep, accident. I'm like, that's fine. I'm coming inside. And so my partner gets there, and he's talking to him, and I walk back in the bedroom, and I hear a really muffled whimper, is the best I can describe it. And this is a rather large guy, and I go over to the bed, and there's a comforter stuffed down between the bed and the wall, right? And I pull this comforter out, and I realize this man has beaten this woman to a pulp and then stuffed her between the bed and the wall and stuffed a comforter over the top of her to hide her from us when we got there. And I get her out, and, you know, she's a little bitty thing. I mean, she was maybe 110 pounds. This guy was, you know, 230, 240, just over 6 foot tall. He was a good sized guy. And he had just pummeled this little girl. And I was so angry. When I came walking in the living room, I told him to turn around, put his hands behind his back. But in reality, I wanted him to do anything other than put his hands behind his back. But he complied very quickly, and we took him out. And it broke my heart because, you know, a month later, whenever I'm showing up to testify against the guy in court, she pulls up out front with him, taking him to the court case. And they're in love, and she's telling me that she wants to drop all the charges and that, you know, she had lied, that's not what happened. And it's frustrating. And I'm sure families see the same thing. You know,
But I think you're right, it's frustrating, and you were just talking about other states have different laws. And I know in state of Missouri, it's a lot more lax and not current. I've heard horror stories where the individual end up almost near death, and yet the person that did it ends up getting released after he puts pressure on the person that he beat it up.
yeah.
They'll
And-
show that great warm love I was talking about earlier the whole time, you know,
I've
waiting for that
changed.
court date, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Question. I was wondering, sometimes do they stay in a relationship because they can't afford to be on their own?
I honestly think being able to afford it is on the very bottom of that list. But it'll be the first thing they mention because it's out of shame. It is a lot harder to say to you, I can't leave because I love the person who's doing this to me. That doesn't make sense to you. But what does make sense to you is if I can't afford it.
And one thing is, if they're just mistreating you and not the children,
Mhm.
they just stay there because the children aren't getting, they're okay. And because of the money situation.
Yeah, so even if the children are not being abused, they're still being abused. They know it's happening. But it might just be how, in their mind, they make it make sense, you know?
I think that the biggest thing is, I've seen, and I know you guys lived through it, and I've seen it with family members and people in the community, and that, is that you get so invested into the relationship. Your life is a part of that heartbeat,
Mhm.
just like it was in your own family being abusive, that you can't foresee anything beyond trying to make this better. and living this life.
Yeah,
And it's almost like, it's almost like you're gonna be suffocated if you can't be with it.
well, and I've said it before, it's like every day I would get up and go to work and live a very normal life, and no one was any wiser. And then as soon as work was over, immediately I had to think, oh, I've got to go home. And it's almost like you're preparing yourself for war. So your whole life is taken up with trying to live a normal life and make it look normal, or preparing for God only knows what whenever you get home. Thinking about what you can do to get out of it, it's almost like you don't have time or the mental capacity to do it because you're so preoccupied with looking and feeling normal, or what are you going to do when you get home if it's a bad day?
You know,
And so how do you actually go on, a good example, I mean, Jim, did you end up getting in relationships in beginning of your life and being abusive or have an anger issue, or how do you break that mold?
So, I'm still fighting it. So to kind of cover me in a nutshell.
I'm not putting you in a
No,
spotlight
no,
in the
no.
sense that,
And so, like, I think one of the biggest things that I've struggled with relationships and stuff is, so I had a mom that allowed someone to physically abuse me. And then my mom she would leave us home alone for weeks at a time. And I was 4
Little.
or 5
Yeah.
and younger, because she was out doing whatever. And it was me and her. Like she's a year and a half older, not even a year and a half, a little over a year older than me, and she was the one taking care of me. And then, we ended up moving in with my dad. Not the best environment there, much better than what we ever had. There were some issues that we had to work through with that. I didn't know what a healthy, good relationship looked like. Then I ended up in a marriage that wasn't healthy as well, but in different ways. I was just used in other ways in that. I can't tell you what a healthy relationship looks like, and I still struggle with it. My girlfriend will be the first to tell you I'm horrible at relationships. I want to be loved. I just don't really know what that looks like. My grandma, I never understood why she cried whenever we were little, because every time she asked me if I was okay, if I wanted something, my go-to answer from whenever I was this big was, "No, I'm okay. I'm okay." I could be starving. "No, I'm okay." And she would just cry because she knew it was a preset answer that would come out of me automatically. No matter what, I'd have a broken arm. "No, I'm okay. I'm okay." Because I think she knew that there was a lot that led up to get me to that point.
But like back to your question, I don't really know what makes one person go through, for example, growing up like we did, and one person will end up being the abuser in the relationship as an adult, right? And then other people go through it and we end up being the ones that get abused instead of the abuser. It's kind of like, I almost feel like it's sometimes you take after your mom, sometimes you take after your dad. We don't really know why. It just happens, You pick up on different traits or qualities or things from someone that you've grown up with. And our mother was a very compassionate person,
Strong person.
kind, a big heart in the moments. And I think that's what we learned from her, which helped us grow up into
Yeah.
not the bad side, I guess.
And understanding something with my sister, her first relationship, the first time this man ever raised a hand to her, she's
I left.
done. It's over.
Yeah.
You're not doing this
My
to me.
high
I'm
school
not.
sweetheart.
Yep. Fathered her first child. Ended the marriage, not doing it. And I'm like, that's my sis.
Yeah.
You're not. And then the guy she got with, and don't take this wrong, not the best looking guy in the world,
No.
right?
But
You
again,
could've
it
done
goes back
so
to
much
that,
better.
I say, it takes a special kind of personality to be an abuser, and it takes a special personality to be the abused, and those two people have to find each other.
Did you find that for your mom to deal with all this, what was her avenue of release? How did she deal with it?
Well, our mom turned into
A
an
raging
alcoholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that wasn't until we were young teenagers.
Yeah.
I
I
had
think
never
she-
seen her drink.
So she always drank, but not to that extent. You know, it got to the point where even to today, unfortunately, my mom will kill a gallon of vodka on a daily basis to function.
Mhm.
And it's heartbreaking, but, and I'm sure it's her way of dealing with
Coping.
everything else and knowing that, you know, all the hurt she caused and everything else along the way, and that's her way of dealing with it. But I think she very much turned to that initially because that was,
That's how you forget.
that's how you forget, you know, that's how you have a good time.
Mhm.
Paul, let me share something, because we grew
Yeah.
up the same way, with me and my sister. My sister became an alcoholic, so what happened, I was in the Marine Corps, that gave me much structure I never had, going through this abuse. And it was the same thing, we would beat constantly, we learned how to hide, we learned this life, when people take you living, oh, no, fine, never invite anybody to my house. It was just like, and my mom married one guy to the other, it was horrific. So, when I was in the Marine Corps, I started getting anxiety, I had no idea what it was, I thought I was having a heart attack. I found out what happened was that when he took me back to my childhood, I just never dealt with it.
Yep.
So what he said was, and I married an abuser. Now, she was a complete, I mean, I just thought I was a rescuer. Alcohol, she was a gang member, I was in the Marine Corps, I was gonna rescue her. What I found
Yeah.
out was when I was going into this, at 25 years old, I was going to Great Lakes, and this is what the guy said, the psychologist, he said, or psychiatrist was, he said, you married, I said, he said, you purposely married her because that was your normal life. I said, are you telling me? He said, you don't, subconsciously, that was the norm.
Yeah.
And he said, and I married right into it. And it took, and I had no idea, I was thinking, this is insane. But he said, you married me. And like I said, the Marine Corps saved me, where my sister became the drug alcoholic, and she became an abuser. So everything goes, the Marine Corps saved my life, but I had to deal with that for years. So I hear you, and yeah, you learn to hide it well, and people think, oh, you must have a perfect family. And I did the same thing, when I would drive home, I'd be down south of the island in Okinawa, I'd get in the car with my buddy, and I'd say, great, man, I'm going home. All the way home, I'm thinking, how am I gonna deal with this? She
Yeah.
was, I mean, darts in the feet, I mean, not me, but her brother, it was insane. But I would go home saying, prepare myself for that long night.
Yeah.
I would get divorced over it. 5 years, in South Okinawa, and she can't get divorced on an island.
Oh, no.
You learn how to hide it well. And my commanding officer brought me in. She was drunker than a skunk, and I couldn't stop her. I couldn't hear my voice. He pulled me in. He said, Lieutenant, if you ever want to see another promotion in your life, he said, you better get rid of her. Nobody knew. I hid it from everybody. That
Yeah.
this was the life that I was living. She was the abuser, but men don't report it.
That's right.
We're men, but she was the abuser.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Well, and it's hard even to talk about it today. So there are, almost everyone in my life has no idea now. I don't have the same, I don't surround myself in the same, with the same type of people that were in my life before. So it's like I have a whole new life. None of them are aware. I never talk about it, except to you or my husband now. It's because of shame.
You know, talking about something that bothered me. So I was in the military whenever she went through this relationship, and it angered me that I wasn't there to stop it as well. You know, I don't know, like, but again, talking about the person that I would last ever expect to go through something like that. And as you meet her today, she's probably one of the strongest people you'll ever meet. But
So you ended up, were able to separate yourself from him in Florida because of the year
Yep.
apart?
Yes.
Is that where you guys met, or?
No, we met here, and you hit on it briefly about addiction being part of it. he was horribly addicted to methamphetamine. And that's kind of where the abuse would happen. You know, it started out, I would be asleep in the middle of the night because I'm sleeping. That's what people do at night. Well, he doesn't. And I would wake up to him beating me. And I started letting my children stay at the grandparents' house more because I didn't want them around it. Because, you know, I promised myself I'd never let my kids go through what I went through. So that's how I protected them. And then to get him away from the drugs, I thought we can move to Florida. That's where my mom lives. We have at least some type of support system. So I thought we'll move there. I'll get him better. I'll bring my kids, and then we'll have the happy
And
life.
yet your mom was an alcoholic?
Right, yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
You know, if you look back on it, talking about some of the stuff our mom did to you even as an adult when you're living down there, it's a whole different type of abuse there as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah, because, yeah, so then my abuser went to prison, and I was doing good, and then he gets out talking about mom, and guess who helps him? My mother.
Yeah.
And then I was so scared that I was going to go back. And I was with the husband that I have now. We were dating then, and great man, and I was madly in love with him already at that time. And I was still so fearful, not that my abuser would abuse me again, but that I would be lured into that life again by his words or just him. But I didn't. And fortunately, after he finished his little bit of probation down there, he moved back up here. I was still down there. But I wanted to be here where my family was, and I wanted to reunite with my children. And I remember making the decision to move back here. I cried so hard. I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to be with my children. My children didn't want to move to Florida. So we were coming back here, and all I kept thinking is, even though I've been in this healthy relationship with this wonderful man for 2 years now, I'm stupid. I'm going to end up running into the abuser somewhere because he lived right there in the same little town that I was moving back to. What if I let him back in? I'm going to end up right back in the same situation, even after all of this. I was so scared that was going to happen.
I know it's a fear, and abuse is a fear of controlling people,
Mhm.
and that's the biggest scare. How did you? Yeah, sorry.
So your children didn't get to see any of this abuse? They weren't around you?
I would like to think that I protected them and they didn't get to see it, but they most definitely
Because I was wondering,
did.
how do you tell them that this was not the norm, that it's not normal for people to act like that?
Yeah, I never did tell them that that was normal. And a little bit different with my children. They were 8 and 10, somewhere through there, when I met my abuser. So they knew a better normal before that. And they just saw that something terrible was happening to their mom, and all of a sudden their life was just tore apart, and they had to stay with grandma and grandpa more. I can't really speak on what they witnessed or felt or went through any more than that. But as a mom, and I love my children, they're my life, and I still have a lot of guilt.
So they were living up here while you were living in Florida. I can imagine that was one of the hardest
Yeah.
things for you.
Yes.
Well, I would ask my mother later on, I said, Mom, why did you marry them like that? And my mom, Glenn, and sister.
Oh.
She said, I did the best I could for you kids, don't you ever say that. And after years, I just gave up. And even my sister, I watched my sister get beat up, I watched her get talked by this one guy. And when I went home, when I was leaving the Marine Corps, he looked like a small man now. He looked like this mountain of man that beat us up. And I just watched, I sat right there, and that man never talked to me. But my sister, she got mad. She said, "You come home and be with Dad." My mom divorced this guy. Well, the very man that beat her will go. She loves Dad. You know, so I just gave her for Mom and us.
Well, I know some of the big questions would be, especially with people going through the same thing that you're going through, when they find that their abuser deals with substance abuse too, and aside from the abuse and being away from your kids, how do you, what's going on through your mind? How do you cope with all that? That's a lot to deal with.
I think it goes back to what Jimmy was saying earlier. I just pretended, I pushed it down, you know? I, just in the last probably 4 years or 5 years, he pointed out to me that I have PTSD, and I was like, no, that's something that someone who went to war and
Let's understand. How, both of you growing up in the family situation, having to face some of the things that you face with current relationships, and seeing some of your other family members going through things, how do you actually help each other and put each other in check to give each other support? Or are you able to? I mean, I can imagine there's a silence of support at times because you might not want to pry, too.
Yeah, I mean, I hope she knows that, you know, I'll do anything in the world for her, and, you know, her opinion matters more than almost anybody else's in my life. You know, if she told me she didn't like one of my girlfriends, they probably wouldn't be my girlfriend. You know? but you know,
we went through so much together.
yeah.
I hated him growing up. Oh my goodness, we were stuck with each other all of the time, right? I had to take care of this stupid little kid all of the time. He's just annoying. He's terrible. My most favorite person in the world now. I don't know what I would do.
You know, in talking about impacts on kids, I remember my stepdad. So again, whenever we left my stepdad, I was 4 or 5. I was young. I had decided at that age that I was going to kill him at one point. I had already decided. Came to peace with it. I was going to do it. And I don't know, I was probably 16 or so whenever he died.
Yeah.
Of all things, he fell out of the back of a pickup truck and hit his head.
You were mad.
I was furious because I felt like that was robbed from me. So what kind of impact does it take for a 4-year-old child to be so driven that they want to destroy another human being? So yeah, I mean, if you are in one of those relationships right now, it's greatly impacting your kids, and you're not doing them a favor, and you're not hiding it from them. They see it. I was never mad at him for what he did to me. I would step into it to keep him from hitting my mom. You know, I would intentionally get the attention on me, and I was fine with it. If I'm good at anything, it's taking a beating, you know. But it's what he did. It's the constant fear we lived in every single day. The adrenaline I would get when the doorknob jiggled on the front of the house, because I knew he was fixing to walk into it, and I didn't know what version of him was walking through that door. That's what I hated him for. And it took me a long time, years after he was gone, to kind of, 1, forgive him, and 2, forgive myself for not doing more. But you know, what's a 4-year-old going to do? You know, but I was so mad at myself for not doing more, for not stopping it.
Yes.
I understand what they're talking about, because I'm the oldest and youngest. In fact, I'm the only one in this world. And mom's 16, she had me. Okay? I don't know who my father is.
Yeah.
First husband came out of Korea. AWOL.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these young eyes can still remember the little things that he's fussing right now. The biggest thing I've seen, I was with my aunt for about a couple of months. He comes walking in a trailer. He's holding a big old blanket. telling me I'm about 7 or 8 years old, this is your mother, lays it down. Hey, Mom, it's just a blanket, right?
Yeah.
Mom got divorced back there, on her own, we lived here and there, but, yeah. John eyes, the only kid, who do I turn to,
Right.
right?
Yep.
I understand.
You know, and we had kind of talked earlier how Jimmy unfortunately received more of the abuse from the stepdad. I think my saving grace was that they had another child. I had a baby sister, so I was 5 when
Yeah.
she was born. And from the day she came home from the hospital, she slept with me because if she woke the stepdad up, I knew my mom would get beat. So I always had to take care of a baby, and I was a baby. So you were taking care of mom.
Right.
What, I know that your saving grace was living in Florida at the time. If you didn't, as you'd said somewhat, if you didn't have that, you probably would still be in the situation. What do you have to say to people that are going through the things that Jim sees on a daily basis as a police officer?
So, you know, they say, and it happens, there are people who are abusers, and then for whatever reason, they get in another relationship and they don't abuse. And I guess I am a firm believer in if a person that you're with is abusing you, it's never going to stop. No matter how much you love them, no matter how unconditional that love is, no matter what hoops you jump through and how happy you try to make them and how many meals you cook and how many back rubs you give, they're always going to abuse you. It may not be physical one day, that physical abuse may go away, but the mental is still going to be there. And I hate to say that they will need to give up hope, but they need to give up the hope that that relationship is going to be healthy someday, because it won't be.
And I hear this, I mean, how do I put it? And not to stereotype the Boot Hill area as us, but I hear this more and more, and a lot of abusive relationships around this area. The saying goes, either gonna have to walk out the door, or you're gonna actually have to walk out to the cemetery.
Yes.
You know that. So I have a friend, another very strong woman, very, very driven woman. I'm going to kind of tell her story. She was in a very abusive relationship, and they'd kind of split up. She'd gotten her own apartment, but you know he would still try to show up. And he was talking to her on the phone and told her to come to the window. When she got to the window, he took a shot at her with a pistol, and it hit the wall right here next to her head. And she calls the cops and everything, or the cops get called. They show up, and you know the deputy at the time is taking the report, and you know she didn't realize, you know, at that distance with a handgun, from here to here on a handgun, I mean, that's the ballistics of the round vary that much. You know, he was aiming at her, he just missed, and she was telling the officer, no, I don't want to file a report. And she said he was the nicest person in the world. He's like, okay. And he just reaches in his pocket, he pulls out a notepad. He's like, I need your next of kin. She goes, why do you need my next of kin? He's like, because the next time I come here, I need to know who to call to tell them that you're dead, because that's what's going to happen. And he's like, and it's okay. I hate to see a young woman like you die, but I want to know who I can call and, you know, apologize to him that I couldn't save you. And that's what it took for her to realize, like, oh, you're right. You know, the man just tried to kill me, and here I am talking about taking him back.
And I can imagine yet the family members trying to tell her that same thing, would one ear out the other.
Oh yeah.
I think it also helps to have someone that you can talk to that is understanding, that has been through it. Because back to mom and being a horrible alcoholic, whenever I first moved back here, I delivered mail, and I had to deliver mail to his house. And so every day, whenever I got to that block, I would call my mom and make her stay on the phone with me. not because I was scared he was gonna do anything to me, but because I was scared that he was going to like infiltrate me again, you know? And if I had a witness, even if they were on the phone, to what was happening, it would keep me in line to do what was right and just keep moving. So for months, almost every single day, I had to face my abuser and hear how much he loved me and how good he was doing and how he wanted me back and how I was the best thing that ever happened to him and please give him another chance and let him show me all the wonderful things. And I would have to just stay on the phone and keep talking to my mom. It would have been you, but you
Yeah.
weren't here.
Right, I was off
Yeah.
in some other
So
land.
whoever is going through this in that moment and they try to get away, they just need to realize that they can talk their way back into your life and do whatever you have to do.
So there's an app, and I share this, everybody go to, it's called the Circle of Six, and it's a free app. It was made for the girls who would be in Vermont campuses, and it's free. And you download it, you put 6 numbers in it, and it looks like a toy, like a game. And most of the users already know it, and when they hit that simultaneously sends out, contacts those numbers, and gives it a location where that phone is.
Yeah.
And it's free, and it has saved lives. And the last year I was out in Arizona, I sat on the fatality review board for a year, listening to the officers and detectives talk about 1,087 women were killed from their abusers. And I sat there listening to every case. When I walked in the room, they had 4x5 cards. I would start with card number 1. Every step of this case, they would give the abusers time served for like a day in jail. And when they let them out, they go kill them. That would include some of those with children. So every year they would have this thing for domestic violence, and they'd have silhouettes in the park. And I'm telling you, you walk into a park and you see thousands of these silhouettes, and realizing these were human beings and these were little children. So
Ye-
right here at the church, a lot of people are, I'll go have them moved, they're having a fight. I said, no, you call the police here, you let them go with you. I don't want anyone in the church to help anybody. But that's exactly what, 1,000, and I've never forgot, thousands in the 26 areas of domestic violence. And people think, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not physical, it's financial. It's even biblical, they use scripture. Husbands tell, you have to do this or the Bible, you're going to go to hell. I remind people all the time. See, I even get heated up about this because of my own childhood. So when I hear abusers, and people tell you in this church, I want these women to report it. I want the men to report it. It's just,
There's just so much shame, though, that comes along with it. And that's what we have to focus on and work on as a society. I
Well,
mean,
especially, I mean, as you'd said, that you grew up in a small town, so everyone knew everyone. And so even though that you were in Florida, everyone still knew.
yes, but let me tell you, like, for example, here, I told you, there would be other people witness it happen, and it was mainly his family. And nothing would happen. So then he felt comfortable enough to talk to people, you know, out and about, like, oh yeah, I beat her like a man last night. You should have seen it, and almost bragging about it. He tried that one time in Florida, and it's just a different culture. It's just different.
Very much so.
And immediately somebody said, you ever say that again, and I'll show you what being beat like a man is like, you know. So it's harder in this area. I'm almost thankful, as hard as it is, that I went through leaving my children here and moving to Florida thinking that I could make him better, because if it weren't for the laws there, there's no doubt in my mind,
And-
I would probably be addicted to drugs and strung out and still being abused, because what else would I do? You know?
And I hate to say this, it is a culture here in southeast Missouri to look the other way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's something we have to fix as a society. We don't look the other way.
Do you find that your other family members have gone through similar things?
Well, we have one cousin that kind of went through
Oh, yeah.
a somewhat abusive relationship. But that ended not so well for the young man.
Mhm.
And then, I don't know about our youngest sister, Jennifer, what her relationships look like.
Yeah, the baby that I helped raise, you know, whenever she was tiny, we haven't seen in,
Years,
yeah,
years.
talking about how it affects
Wow.
the family and different dynamics.
Did she move down to Florida with your mom, or?
So when Mom finally did leave the abusive stepfather and moved down to Florida, because that's where she's from, then Mom started getting mixed up and in trouble again, and she lost custody of all of us. So we went with our dad, and she went with actually her grandparents
Gotcha.
on her dad's side. So you just kind of lose touch, you know?
Understand.
Do you have something you want to say?
My question was, you guys ever find yourself blaming yourself for the abuse? And I kind of started to believe that what you were doing was the cause for it all. And if you did, like, what's your advice for people out there who do blame themselves? If I would have cleaned the house a little bit better today, he wouldn't have came home and beaten me. That's just a wide example, if you understand what I'm saying.
For me, I think I blame myself more for not stopping it. Like, I blame myself for not stopping what was happening to my sister. I blame myself for not stopping what was happening to my mom.
But at the same time, I mean, being a child, it's hard to,
Right, you know, but it's,
and
still, I
it's
know
protective.
when my sister was going through this stuff, I was literally in war in the Middle East. I wasn't here to stop, but it doesn't, you know, I'm not saying it's sane in any way. But, you know, I can definitely see you know, as a kid, I remember a little bit, you know, whenever I got in trouble, it was the guilt of, oh, now, what's going to set him off today?
Yeah.
And I did this, I caused this.
Yeah, but that's not true.
No, it's not true.
It goes back to that, an abuser is an abuser no matter what. And it doesn't matter what anyone does or does not do around them. They're going to abuse.
Yeah, and I think the important part here, remember, is that the abuser, the physical side of it is a very small portion of it. The psychological side is the truly devastating part.
They just
Because
want,
that's even what ties you in strong enough for you to get to the point where he kills them, you know, or I always say he. We always think domestic violence, it's the guy beating the woman, but it's because it happens more that way. But you know, the abusers, the psychological side of it is way more impactful than the physical side. It's what allows the physical side to take place.
Jim, do you, being on the law enforcement side and having to grow up in this environment and seeing the things that are going on a daily basis, do you see at all any progress of the laws changing or things happening, or is it just that it'll be a perpetual situation, even on the educational side?
You know, I think with in our current county, we actually have a prosecutor that's really good about, even if the victim decides to not press charges, he continues through. Unfortunately, the cases don't hold together all the way, but he at least tries. I think education, we need education and a cultural shift in our part of in our little area here. You know, to where, again, we got to get it clear, but we don't tolerate that. I mean, I could fill this place with 1,000 people, and I could say, raise your hand if you think it's okay for someone to beat a woman and a child, and nobody's going to raise their hand. But at the end of the day, how many people witness it or hear it and don't do anything about it? And kind of like when we talked about the human trafficking that one time, seeing something, knowing it's happening, having the ability to step in and stop it, and choosing not to, you're just as culpable as the person doing it. We have to, as a society, say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. It's not okay.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more sensitive though whenever it comes to abuse because it's not okay.
Mm.
You're right. But even if you report it, I forget what the statistics are, but it's like 7 times. It takes like 7 times for someone to be reported and their abuser to go to jail and them to go through that whole court proceedings and everything before they try to break that cycle. And it's I don't know what the answer is, and I've been through it, but reporting it is definitely what you need to do, but you also need to be supportive of the person and let them know that you're here to listen, you know,
But-
and not build that wall,
But
know?
if you get, what was that, 3 traffic tickets, you might lose your insurance.
Right, yeah, yeah, but you can abuse 100 times and you're
Yeah.
still fine.
And you're still fine.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, so, after Sandy and my wife was abused for 22 years by her ex. We were married 5 years, but the first couple years she didn't carry anything, I just had to step back and figure out, you know, when are you gonna let me in? And then, we were sitting in a group one day, had a small group, going through boundaries of marriage. And she said, it's been 5 years, I can now trust him, who he is, as he is in the story. I didn't even know this, I'm sitting in a phone group, she goes, I can actually trust Bob now. She never said that to me until that night, when she shared with me. I didn't even realize that. So, for 22 years that was carried, she went over to church, and she's really a good speaker on this. But she shares 22 years, and I asked her the same thing, Sandy, why did you stay? Because that was her son. She wanted to protect, and do everything she could, it was just not, it was too much.
Yeah.
See, it's a long haul, and to this day even, I have to be really careful, I never tell her, I never look at my wife and say, you need to. A long time I let it go and said, if you need advice from me, I'll give it, because, he was very controlling. So
There-
I had to step back and say, if you need advice, just let me know, I'll give it.
There's this is sort of apropos, sort of closing things off. I think it was Hemingway that actually did a short story. It was about a doctor in the 1800s. And the doctor ended up finding his future wife out of a crowd. And he said, I'm going to marry that lady. She's the most beautiful lady in the world. And then he did marry her. And he said, the only thing that you would be the most beautiful woman in the world, lady in the world, but you have a mole. And because I'm a doctor, I want to eventually remove that mole. And he eventually hammered her and talked with her over the years and eventually coached her to the point that she said, okay, just because I don't want to deal with it anymore, you can remove the mole. He removed the mole, and on the operating table, she had actually passed away. And then at that moment, in the short story, it said, now that you're the most beautiful person in the world.
Mhm.
So I think that's our time. Thank you very much. And we appreciate your participation and your knowledge and learning. And hopefully we can educate people so that we can look beyond that mole.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yep.